In this episode of The Bear Roars, Dan chats with Natty Zola, partner at Matchstick Ventures, a venture capital firm investing in early-stage startups across the US and Canada. Before joining Matchstick, Natty co-founded Everlater, a travel startup backed by Techstars. Later, he served as managing director of Techstars Boulder, guiding 63 companies through the accelerator, including transformative startups like Veho, Soona, and Tilt. Dan and Natty dive into his entrepreneurial journey, the evolution of Techstars, and Matchstick's approach to identifying and supporting standout startups. They also discuss pivotal lessons learned from great CEOs, the art of pivoting, and the power of building community and entrepreneurship. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
Natty Zola, I'm looking forward to this one.
Me too.
Yeah, so you are going to have great stories to tell that are, I think, really authentic Boulder from both a capital formation standpoint, from a accelerator standpoint, from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here.
I'm ready.
Great. So let's talk about not you and not Matchstick. Let's talk about Techstars. What is Techstars? Most people probably know. How did you come across Techstars? So I guess we're talking about you a bit. And what do you think Techstars really means? Means both looking backwards in time, but more importantly, what do you think Techstars means as you look forward in time?
Great. So Techstars is a startup accelerator with the goal being, how do we help companies make a ton of progress in the earliest stages by connecting them with great mentorship, with teaching a lot of the lessons learned from people who have been founders before, connecting them with capital partners, and really integrating them in their local community. It was started in 2007 here in Boulder by David Cohen and a group of other folks, including Brad Feld, Jared Polis, and David Brown.
And Jared Polis is the governor.
Correct.
Let's talk about who each of those people are. Brad Feld is most famous for writing the foreword on my book that hasn't been published yet.
Yep.
But he's done some other things as well. So maybe tell us a little bit about Brad and tell us a little bit about the other guys as well.
So all four of them are kind of Boulder legends. So Brad Feld is a longtime venture capitalist here in Boulder, founded a firm called Foundry Group. And before that was a partner with some other funds based here. And prior to that, he was an entrepreneur. But he really led, I would say, the most recent wave of venture funding coming out of Colorado and really helped put Colorado on the map nationally in the most recent wave of entrepreneurial activity.
Yeah, and to put that in perspective, we've had venture capital firms that have existed for a long time here in Colorado, but a very small number of them. And coming out of the whole telecom meltdown, dot bomb, and then accentuated by the 2008 Great Recession, most of them, played their course and started to go away. A few of them kind of navigated through that, including one Brad had prior to Foundry, but they mostly were coming to the end of their natural lives. So very small number, though around for a lot of years, very small number and kind of coming to their natural end. And as you said, Brad then leads the charge of forming Foundry Group, and it was kind of a, not just a rebirth of, I would say, venture and tech activity here, but bringing it to a whole different level, like a nationally and globally significant level. So
I agree with that. I mean, Brad is an incredible person. And one of the things that he did outside of running a great venture fund based here in Boulder, which helped put Boulder on the map, was he also spent a lot of time blogging about venture capital in the early days of blogs. And we, in this modern venture environment, forget what it was like 15 years ago or more, where a lot of the principles and practices of venture capital were pretty secretive. And one of the things Brad did was he really wanted to demystify it for entrepreneurs everywhere. And so he started blogging along with Fred Wilson, a few other people. And that era was really important for venture capital, not just locally, but nationally, in terms of access, demystifying what historically had been a pretty closed ecosystem and closed environment. And I think that really was the catalyst for this modern innovation economy that we see across the whole US and obviously see here in Colorado. And I think that actually played a huge part in it, was his openness around what venture capital is, how it works, advice, and really spreading that openly and freely. And that helped build his brand. It helped spread knowledge and access, and I think it was a really important thing for the whole ecosystem.
Absolutely. I never had kind of a mentor with a capital M. I've had mentors at different phases with small M's, but no one, people say, who's your mentor? I would sort of be able to answer the question, but with caveats. Brad became kind of not really mentor to me because we didn't have a mentor-mentee relationship, but more of a role model in areas that you described, like how to be hyper-transparent, instead of hiding information, how to take what was social media and kind of stick your neck out there. So his blog is part of what inspired me to blog. His transparency as applied to venture capital, I became known as the most transparent CEO when it came to reporting data, both when we were private and then continued that when we were public, maybe to a fault at that point. But I view him as kind of and what he and how he has supported the community both locally here and also spread his wings more broadly, kind of followed his example there as well. So in many ways, I think Brad, despite us, kind of being on different paths, Brad was an important part of my career journey.
He's great. And so getting back to Techstars, he's one of the founders. And excuse me. When Techstars started, all four of the original founders wanted to
go back to the other founders before
we have Brad Feld, who we talked about. We have Jared Polis, who also was an internet entrepreneur.
We have a governor with a similar name.
Very similar name, happens to be the same person.
Yes, so Governor Jared Polis back then wasn't in politics. He was an entrepreneur, and then he partnered with them to launch Techstars. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And then there were two other people, David Cohen and David Brown, who were also co-founders of a few tech startups as well. So what you really had there was four entrepreneurs coming together, one of which was now a venture capitalist. But all of them wanted to do two things. One is they wanted to make it easier for startups to get off the ground and get moving in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and connect them with other successful people to increase the odds of success for those founders. But they also wanted a better way of angel investing. And what better way to angel invest than invite a bunch of entrepreneurs who you think are very high quality, working on interesting things, into your office, connect them with mentors, help them make a bunch of progress, and on the way, learn, hey, which one of these should we invest in? And so Techstars was launched here in Boulder. First class was in 2007. And
then let's just pause for a second there. So what were you doing in 2007? What was your journey prior to 2007?
So I didn't learn about Techstars till 2008. Okay. In 2007, I was working in finance in New York. So a quick background on me, I actually was born and raised in Boulder, Colorado, family of teachers and social workers. So my parents started New Vista High School. So I actually have some entrepreneurial DNA in my background, even though I'm the first business person in my family. There's still some of that punk rock, entrepreneurial, do things differently DNA in my family. My parents helped start that school.
So when you say punk rock, who's your punk rock go-tos?
I'm actually more of a rap. I'm into rap.
Really? Who were your punk rock go-tos?
Punk rock, I mean, I grew up in the era of Offspring, Green Day, not too, out there, but kind of the mainstream of that era.
Mainstream punk.
And I mean, punk rock, people just sort of doing things differently and, not being sort of afraid of things. And so, I'm lucky. I grew up in not an entrepreneurial family, but a family that thought differently and was innovative and trying to do things in novel ways. So, but I grew up in Boulder. I went to school on the East Coast and I graduated with a degree in finance from the University of Maryland. I went to the University of Maryland for two reasons. One, they had a good engineering program and they had a bad track team. So I wanted to walk onto the track team and run Division I. I did make the team. We can go into that story if it's relevant at some point. But ultimately, I graduated with a degree in finance because I fell in love with and was super curious around how money moved and how business worked. And
well, you got to tell us how you did on the track.
I was a. Well, it depends who you compare it to. I got my butt kicked at the Division I level. Maybe compared to you, Dan, I'd be good.
I ran some cross country in my senior year of high school. Just let the record show.
Well, for the sake of the audience here, we don't need to compare 5K times here, but. I did end up running all through college, 9-time letter winner, team captain, national honors recognition.
As a walk-on.
So
Division I.
Division I, yep. But I went to University of Maryland. Then I graduated with this degree in finance. I went to work in New York City. And after my 2-year entry-level role at GE Capital and their financial management program, which is their CFO training ground, I decided...
Which was probably a great training ground in those days.
Yeah. Yeah, I was rotating around different GE businesses, hand in hand with the CFOs of those businesses, learning the businesses, improving them, both strategically from a financial side and operationally. Examples is I was flying around with the CEO of GE on the private jet, going to investor relations, Jeff Immelt.
How was it being around Jeff? I mean, he was, at the point he was named CEO, he was, he won a really hard fought kind of succession plan where, if my memory was, there were 4, real contenders, and he prevailed. And the other 2 ended up being CEO. 2 of the others ended up being CEOs of major companies. But but it didn't play out that well over the subsequent years. Is also my memory.
For the first time, Dan Caruso pulls back the curtain in his book Bandwidth, a memoir that celebrates the pioneers who invented the internet's early backbones, the renegades who lit the fiber revolution, the antics that caused the biggest market crash of all time, and the new wave of entrepreneurs who led the industry back from its ashes. Though it seemed to happen in the blink of an eye, the Bandwidth adventure was a multi-decade roller coaster ride involving larger-than-life successes and devastating failures. The unbridled ambition of newly minted billionaires and high-profile tycoons created extraordinary value, unprecedented value destruction, and endless opportunities for a brave few. This reflects tech's past, present, and future, and is a story you won't soon forget. It will help you prosper during today's AI tech bubble. The book is available for pre-order at dan-caruso.com/bandwidthbook and released in early 2025.
I didn't get enough interactions with Jeff to have a strong opinion about it, but when I was with him, he always had a very big, bold vision for where he wanted GE to go. And candidly, I'm not sure that the actions actually ever aligned to those bold visions. And so, an interesting lesson learned there is maybe you can talk the talk, but you also got to walk the walk and make stuff happen. And I'm not sure that was there. I didn't really see that firsthand, but I did get to travel around with him and go to his investor analyst meetings and do all the preparation for that. I was in the IR team for one of my roles.
And he inherited, just for the viewers, what he inherited when he inherited GE was succeeding one of the most legendary CEOs in business at that time. Someone who's
track record.
Yeah, what was Jack's last name?
Welch.
Jack Welch. So Jack Welch was considered like the CEO of public companies. Others aspired to be like him. Others aspired to be like GE. So the succession plan to Jack Welch was like, okay, you're going to replace Jack. Jack ran the succession plan, and he was handing over what people thought to be just an incredible machine of value creation, Berkshire Hathaway type machine. So unlike other situations where the handoff is done where you're trying to pick up the pieces that have gone astray, it was perceived that he was being handed off kind of a company that was in excellent shape.
I was there an interesting time. So I was when I joined GE, half of GE was a bank. And what GE had grown over time, and I think this ended up both being very lucrative for GE and over a period of time, but ultimately was a big reason why GE has had a tough decade since, was that they grew the banking side of the business too fast. And so I was on that banking side, and the premise there was GE had this industrial grade balance sheet, AAA rated, because of all their industrial businesses and the consistency of cash flows from those businesses. And therefore they could borrow and raise money super cheaply. And so what they did was they would raise money super cheaply based on the industrial balance sheet and then lend it to other businesses at a higher rate. And when I left GE, 50% of GE's revenue and I think a larger even share of its earnings were from that lending unit. And I actually worked in that lending unit. And so it's actually a good business idea, I think, to leverage that resource, but it had kind of gotten so big. So we were lending to businesses that were outside of the scope of GE. Example was they had some subprime mortgages in Japan, which is obviously not really related to GE's core industrial businesses. So,
well, there's a reason why others are paying higher interest rates, because there's more risk. So it's not really an arbitrage per se. I mean, you can think of it as like, as simple terms of, I've got a low rate and I'm going to loan it to people who are going to pay me a higher rate. That's like, collecting money, but the higher rate is because it's
higher
taking
risk.
on more risk. So the question becomes, are you able to manage that risk profile? I mean, it's kind of, that's the same thing at Berkshire Hathaway at the end of the day. I mean, Berkshire Hathaway, the key behind their big performance was recognizing that insurance was really a way of getting other people's money, in advance, and what you're covering those insurance premiums, and then you have an opportunity to invest it and earn a higher rate of return. So you're arbitraging the difference, and it works if you're really smart at investing it. it would blow up in your face if you were really bad at investing it. So Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, just happened to be really good at investing it.
And yeah, my experience at GE, I think GE was quite good, but ultimately probably scaled too big. And so maybe, circling back to my story here, I had 2 great years at GE. I learned a ton. This was a great training ground for me. I had saved up money for the first time in my life and went on a round the world trip with my childhood best friend while I deferred a private equity job 6 months to go on this trip with my childhood best friend. And so we set off to South America, and I grew a beard and a shaggy fro, and I got to travel around South America.
Back to punk rock stage.
Back to punk rock. That was a great trip, but on that trip, the GFC happened. And so not only did the private equity job I expected to go back to disappear.
The GFC?
The global financial crisis of 2008 happened.
Yeah, so going into what they call the Great Recession.
Yep, exactly. And so I thought I had this private equity job lined up, which disappeared. But at the same time, I was on this trip. I was with my childhood best friend, Nate. We're both named Nathaniel, Nate and Natty. And we got the entrepreneurial bug. I don't know what I can't pinpoint it back to an instant, but something real. We had this realization, why are we going back to these sort of, private equity jobs where we're just someone in a suit in New York City? And no offense to that, but we realized we wanted to do more. We wanted to build. We wanted to create things, and we were young and ambitious and hungry and wanted to do stuff. And so on a sailboat between Colombia and Panama, I think we spent $40 for the 7-day sail between Colombia and Panama. So you can guess the conditions. Actually, funny story, there were 10 beds on this 40-foot boat, and they booked 13 of us. So we ended up having to sleep on the deck. But it was a great experience. We survived. But on that trip,
that's the $40.
Yeah. On that trip, we hatched a plan and realized we want to start a company together. And that company would solve a problem that we faced while traveling. And this was early social media days. How do you record and share a travel experience online? Connected in with your social networks, but also have this nice wrapper around it. And we headed home a couple months after that to start that, and realized, we don't have any more money. We spent all of our money on this trip. I guess we're moving back to Boulder into our parents' basements to start this company. That was one of the best eras, even though here I am, 24 years old, no money, living in my parents' basement, teaching myself how to code, starting this company. But, when you're an entrepreneur, you do what you need to do to get the company off the ground. No one was funding companies this is late 2008. And no one's funding companies. Here's 2 business guys. We want to build a tech product. We go to my parents' basement every day for 13 to 15 hours a day, teaching ourselves how to code to build our prototype. This connects to the earlier part of the conversation. That's when I learned about Techstars. Mm-hmm. So here I'm in Boulder. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm young. I'm super hungry. I'm working super hard. And I meet the 4 guys who are starting Techstars. And I realized...
Do you recall when you first met them, who you met, what the circumstances were?
Yeah. So actually, my co-founder, Nate, went to Macalester College in Minneapolis. He went to a Macalester alumni event in Denver. And Seth, who's a partner at Foundry, also went to Macalester. And they literally sat next to each other, didn't know each other. Seth looks over and says, "Hey, I'm Seth. I went to Macalester, class of whatever." Nate says, "Hey, I'm Nate. I went to Macalester, class of 2005. Seth says, "What do you do?" And Nate says, "Oh, I'm running a tech startup." And Seth says, "Oh, that's good. I run a VC fund." And before you know it, they hit it off. And so Seth says, "Hey, you guys are too early for us, but do you know about this thing called Techstars?" And then connects us in. And so we realized, hey, Techstars is this great catalyst for up-and-coming entrepreneurs. We would be silly to not apply to this program. And so we applied and got into the 2009 Techstars Boulder program. I think they had 10 slots. I'm sure we were 10th, if not 11th.
What was the college? I'm sure that
Macalester College.
Macalester connection.
Yeah, it was a great connection. And ultimately we got into Techstars, and we can talk more about Techstars. We got into Techstars. I think in spite of a lot of things, but David Cohen, who we got to know really well, saw that we weren't going to quit. We were hustling. We were working super hard, proving we could code, proving we could galvanize the community around our startup. And he said, "Hey, I'll take a bet on these guys." And I'm forever grateful to him for that, because so many of the things that have happened later in my journey come from Techstars. And I love that ecosystem. I think it's very powerful and a great resource for founders. So I'll pause there.
Great. Well, let's maybe in a more abbreviated way, let's complete the Techstars, and then we'll pick off your story. So, but the part of the Techstars that was directly in your story, I do want to stay on that a bit. So let's skip your part of Techstars. We'll come back to that. But give us like the 5-minute, 2007 to 2020, late 2024, Techstars started here. What has it done since then? Where's it going looking forward?
Great. So Techstars in 2000.
And by the way, David Cohen's going to be a guest on here early next year. So we'll go into it more deeply with him. But given how big of a deal that was from your journey, it'd be great to hear your kind of wrapper perspective on that.
Great. Yeah. 2007, Techstars starts here in Boulder. Small class, 10 companies a year, helping accelerate those founders. 2009, I go through the program. Late 2009, they expand to another region saying, hey, this is working in Colorado. All the companies weren't from Colorado. Maybe about half came in from other places. The model was working very well. Entrepreneurs were making a ton of progress. The community was super engaged. Companies were off raising money. It seemed to really bend the trajectory for a bunch of companies. So it was really working. And the Techstars founders said, hey, I think we can do this in more than one place. Let's do another program. And I believe they launched Boston, then they launched Seattle. And so this concept of how can you build a selective class of great entrepreneurs, put them in a 13-week boot camp experience where they're with each other, you surround them with mentors, you give them a bunch of mentorship and advice, really can change the course for these founders.
And how new was this concept of accelerator?
This was a very new concept. So I believe Brad Feld coined the term accelerator.
Okay.
And at this time, there are only two accelerators. There's Y Combinator, which also starts in 2007, and Techstars, which starts in 2007.
Oh, wow.
So this is a new concept. But it has really scaled. So, catching us up to today, Techstars is running 50 plus accelerator programs a year now around the world. Each program still is accepting about 10 entrepreneurs. So you're seeing, or 10 companies. So you're seeing about 500 companies be able to go through this accelerator program. I think there's about 4,500 startups that have gone through it. Tons of unicorn companies have come from it, tons of breakout companies. It's become a very powerful platform for entrepreneurs to accelerate their company. It does a great job of connecting local communities with entrepreneurs. It gets mentorship involved. It's got a core value of give first, which has been very important for certainly the Boulder and the Colorado ecosystem, which has been a big part of our brand as an ecosystem, which came from here. And it's become a very, very important thing for the entrepreneurial ecosystems.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's a bit of a, somewhat newly defined future ahead of it that I think is going to be really exciting, and we'll cover that when David's on here. So let's go back to now your journey. So you're part of the Techstars program. What happened at that point?
So 2009, we go through Techstars. We are two business guys teaching ourselves how to code. Luckily, at that point, we'd gotten some great folks in the community, other engineers who joined our crazy pirate ship trying to build a startup, and they had helped us level our engineering prowess up. We go through Techstars 2009. We raise capital coming out of that program, and we start scaling the business. 2 years into the business, we have I don't know what you call it, oh crap moment. We spend the first 2 years growing and building the world's best travel blog under the premise of how do we help travelers record and share their travel experiences. We end up building the best product out there, but we really struggled to get users. And in retrospect, seems pretty obvious, but what we didn't see going into it is, one, people don't travel all the time. So it's very hard and costly to get in front of people who are traveling at the right time. And the travel industry is the largest spender of Google AdWords and online marketing of any industry. So as a small startup, you're just never going to be able to compete with them and get mind share with travelers at the right time. Mm-hmm. The second problem is not everyone is a content creator. But some people will say 90% of people are just consumers, 9% dabble in creating content, and 1% are your real content creators. Maybe people who write books. And so ultimately, this was a huge challenge for us. It would be very expensive to acquire customers, and very few of them would actually blog. And so we had this realization, which is you can build the best product in the world, but it really doesn't matter if you can't figure out distribution. And people always say, first-time founders focus on products, second-time founders focus on distribution. And that was totally our mistake. And so we had this oh crap moment 2 years in where we realized, hey, we're never going to grow the business that we aspire to build here because we can't figure out distribution. One of our engineers came to us as we were trying to figure out what to do. And he said, hey, I noticed a lot of people going on tours are using our product. Is that interesting? And we kind of looked at each other and said, hey, that might be interesting. Let's see if these tour companies like this content. So we started sending the blogs from these people who were going on trips, organized tours to the tour companies. And every one of them wrote back to us and said, how do we get more of these?
Wow.
And so, I think we're pretty smart, but you don't have to be that smart to realize, hey, there's some market pull here. So we asked all those tour companies and said, hey, if we could get more of your guests blogging about their trips, would you pay us for that? And they said, absolutely. And we said, well, would you promote this to your guests? And they said, absolutely. And so we realized, hey, this solved our big problems. We don't need to worry about distribution because we go through the tour companies. And we don't need to worry about monetization because we just charge the tour companies for it. And so we made a B2C to B2B pivot of the business and effectively built vertical SaaS for the tour industry to help their travelers record and share their travel experiences. And that business worked. And so we then spent the next couple of years scaling that.
Talk about the word pivot as it pertains to, certainly this experience, but the importance of the word pivot when it comes to companies you're investing in, companies you've observed.
Yeah. So a pivot is, I guess the concept is, you expecting to go one direction and you realize that that's not the best direction for you. And so you evolve and you move and you figure out a slightly different direction and that's better. So, a pivot in basketball or whatever is you're going in a certain direction and you plant one foot and then you go in the next direction. And so, businesses are doing this all the time. And frankly, now in my investing role, every single company that we've invested in that's gotten huge has had at least one pivot. And so I think that it's sort of expected as an entrepreneur that whatever idea you embark on, it's very unlikely that exact idea is going to actually be the right idea or the winning idea.
Talk about the characteristic of, because pivoting is not easy for a lot of entrepreneurs. It's extraordinarily natural to others. And if I was to give one example of who it's extraordinarily natural to, I think Elon Musk would be a very easy one. He is the first one to say, we need to do this, but he's also the first one to say, I didn't really mean that, I meant this, and never thinks twice about it, doesn't apologize to anyone. He just kind of finds his way by kind of meandering around.
Well, he's gathering data.
He's gathering data.
Yep.
But the difference between those that you've observed where they need to pivot and they just can't let go of what they want, and why you think those types have trouble letting go versus ones where it's so natural, they don't even have to use the word pivot. They're just doing it. Maybe talk about those two extremes and the spectrum between them.
It's a great question. I think that many entrepreneurs go into it because they have a thesis and they really are passionate about that thesis. And sometimes it can be hard to admit when you're wrong, especially when you've put yourself out there and charted a course. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter whether you were right or wrong on any individual decision or thesis. What matters is at the end, did you get it right? Did you evolve and figure out and learn and gather data and evolve and pivot and find the ultimate?
But you're sort of describing, you kind of skipped over the part where people who have trouble pivoting, because it's not just they have trouble and you have that kind of conversation and all of a sudden, they're quite comfortable pivoting. It's some just can't do that. And I think, the difficulty of, boy, if I pivot, that's an admission of I'm wrong, or what other?
I think there's a stubbornness,
I think stubbornness.
Well, I think a trait that we've seen that we look for in entrepreneurs is stubbornness, but not it's sort of the strong opinions weakly held. Like you need to be stubborn and have a vision.
I said it again, strong opinions weakly held.
Yeah, strong opinions weakly held,
what does that mean?
To me, that means you need to have an opinion on something. Like if you're an entrepreneur and you're going out and building something, you have to have an opinion around what you're building. And I generally think the more opinionated you are, the better. Like we want to back entrepreneurs who have a strong thesis around the world and how it can be different and where a big business can be built. And so we appreciate that. But if you're unwilling to look at data and talk to customers and evolve that, and maybe have, that strong opinion, but weakly held, where if you learn something that makes you think about the world differently, or the core assumptions of your business are proving to be wrong, we want an entrepreneur who's willing to hear that and evolve and pivot. I think that that's an art, not a science for entrepreneurs. Like sometimes you need to be stubborn, sometimes you need to listen to data, and there's no perfect recipe for that. But the best entrepreneurs we see are the ones that figure that out. And I have not figured out the recipe for that, but I think that's it's like a give and take always of like, how strong is this data? Is it actually challenging my assumptions? Do I need more data? Do I need less data? When do I make that decision? I think that's actually the hardest part of entrepreneurship. What's your take?
Well, I think there's the other end extreme where, and maybe this is you're pivoting all the time because you never had conviction on anything. But the ones who are best at it, I don't know that it's a learned skill. I think they don't even know they're that way. And maybe they're using your words, maybe the conviction never changed. They can always rationalize that what they believe to begin with is still what's driving what they're doing. They're just really quick to kind of, change the path and how they're headed there. So quick that they don't even slow down to like have a discussion that they're pivoting, maybe even to the point where it can frustrate some of the people around them. Like, hey, I talked to you last week and you said we're going there. Now I'm talking to you this week and all of a sudden I find out we're going there. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. We're still going, to where we have this conviction. So what? We rejiggered the exact path we're taking, and it just sort of happens unapologetic and without, but the key is when they're doing that, they really do have an eye on a prize, a unique eye on a prize. And that's not what they're moving around with. They're moving around just the path to get there.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think there's pivots and there's leaps. So pivots are you're maintaining the same vision and the same change you want to create in the world. You really don't care how you get there. And in fact, you're always looking for better ways to get there, and you're pivoting your way towards that ultimate vision. And I would say like it's pretty important to have that vision should sort of be strongly held and unlikely to change. It's the Jim Collins BHAG, it's the North Star, whatever it is. And I think that needs to stay relatively firm, but how you get there should be pretty open. You should be pretty, you should have strong opinions loosely held of how you get there. Leaps we have seen occasionally work, although a leap to me is when you change that North Star. That's when you go from, instead of how do we get to Mars and not really caring how you get there, but trying to figure out the fastest, best way to get to Mars. But all of a sudden you are doing something totally different.
Yeah, and that's happy on Earth.
yeah. And it's, Elon's a tough example because he's doing,
is that kind of a leap?
Elon, anything Elon does, like he's probably going to do a great job on it. And he's unique in that he can do a lot of those things. But, I think talking about this pivot concept, you're still going for the same mission. You're just pivoting how you're going to get there. I worry usually when entrepreneurs leap. I think it's sort of unlikely that that's going to work just because it's so different. You really can't leverage anything that you've done to that point if you're going to leap. And by the way, leap stands for leave everything and punt.
Leave everything and punt.
Leave everything and punt. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, so you had to pivot.
So we pivoted,
you went
halfway.
From B2C to B2B. That's roughly in what time frame? 2000?
This is late 2010. So a couple of years in.
Okay.
And
who were your early investors?
Early investors were Techstars, and then Highway 12 Ventures, which is a venture fund that no longer exists. They did very well and shut their doors down after doing super well. They led both of our rounds, so we raised 2 rounds of funding. We luckily had supportive investors, and they supported us through this pivot. And ultimately that pivot was really important for us. And we grew revenue, we figured out our distribution. And for us, coming back to the mission conversation, our mission originally was, we felt like traveling is such an important experience for people to break down cultural barriers, to see the world, to get a broader worldview. And we were frustrated with how few people in America travel. I can't remember at the time, the stat was like 10% of people in Congress even have passports. And we just felt like if we could make travel seem more accessible and share some of those stories, we'd get more people to travel. got more people to travel, we would build a more worldly society. And that's ultimately why we started the company. And so we realized for us, it didn't matter if we were a B2C or a B2B company, as long as we were helping people share their travel experiences and inspiring people to travel, because we had this great travel experience, we were excited. And so this B2C to B2B pivot, we were still going after our same mission, just it was a pivot underneath
Let's
that.
talk about the importance of mission or purpose, because everyone has a mission statement, everyone has a vision, everyone has values. Some have to reach really hard. A lot of them can sound very similar to one another. So talk about the importance of that, not just having one, but having one that, what's the difference between having good and well-serving visions / purpose versus having them, but not playing the role you would want it to play?
I've seen visions and purpose be very powerful for the entrepreneurs we've worked with, and for me personally. But I think they're hard to come up with. It's a lofty thing to figure out, like, what is your mission? What is your purpose as a person, as a business? But I think the more that you spend time identifying what that is and articulating it, the easier all other decisions become. One part of my story I didn't share, which is actually a connection to Boulder, is one of my jobs. Actually, the job I worked in college was I worked for Jim Collins, the business author of Good to Great, Great by Choice, How the Mighty Fall.
I'm looking there because I know I have a few of his books. It's just not the ones
he's
up here.
Great. He's based here in Boulder.
Yeah.
Super lucky connection. His wife was my
Can
high
you
school.
help get him on this podcast?
I probably can. I'll talk to him. I mean, he is a capital M mentor for me. I mean, someone who just I look up to immensely and has taught me so much. And a lot of his work comes down to, what's the core purpose and core vision of a company. And that's a key tenet to Built to Last. And so I don't know, for me, it's very important.
I know he's got a lot of books, but the Built to Last, what other one was in that?
So there's 3 core books that Jim wrote. He wrote Built to Last, Good to Great, and Great by Choice.
Yeah. So the Built to Last, I think, was more important to me than, Good to Great was.
That was the big one. That was the big one. Yeah.
But the Built to Last kind of then looked back at the companies and said, okay, which ones stayed great and which ones didn't, and what might have been the difference between the two. And, having gone through what I went through in my career, I started out, not like you, with a big company, then was part of a, early company that got really big, and then was part of another early company that got really, really big, and then built my own. And there was the big ups and downs in that case, in each of those cases. And the question was, for me, is if you're going to build something, what does it mean to build to last, and what's going to make it sustainable? What's going to make it such that it's really iconic? And when I started Veho, because I had come off of a very financially successful turnaround that was really good for investors and really good for the core team, including me financially, but it was tearing apart a company. It wasn't building a company. And so I said, if I'm going to do one more thing, I want to do something that is built to last, that will be there for decades to come. And we started in 2007. It's now 2024. I'm no longer there, but it's
built to last.
It's still going strong.
Yeah.
So the tenets of that book certainly influenced kind of my thinking.
Well, and Jim has been a huge influence for me. And getting back to the kind of core purpose, core mission, I think it's just a powerful motivator, for when the going gets rough. Like, if you can come back to some sort of mission or purpose it really helps clarify and keep people motivated.
But everyone has mission and purpose. What go a little bit deeper into, like, what makes for
a good one? Or
yeah.
I don't know if I have a good description of what makes it a good one. I think the only thing that I would say is the more authentic, the better. And I don't think a mission or purpose necessarily has to always be huge or grand. I mean, you could start a school in Boulder with the mission or purpose of changing or bringing the more modern ways of learning and teaching to students, like my parents did, and create a school in Boulder. And the impact they've had is I think tremendous. It's not, a scalable company, but in the community, it's been really important. So there's that scale. There's the scale of building a company built to last. That's, so I just think it comes back to, like we have precious time on earth. what are you motivated by? Like, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do? And that can be a micro purpose. It can be really big. And I think about it a lot in my role now as an investor. Is I'm really, since I'm an early stage investor, I really want to understand what is this person or this entrepreneur's purpose? What is their mission? Because the more I feel like that is authentic to them, the more I feel like it's their core motivation is to see this change or see this thing happen, the more conviction I have that they're going to ride out those ups and downs. Because as you know, better than anyone, or all of us as entrepreneurs, like it's not easy. And if you don't have that core purpose or mission driving you, it's just, there's a lot of opportunity cost.
Yeah, I just want to kind of replace some of what you said and kind of pull out some of the key things. Authentic is an important word, but authentic is, I think, more in the obvious category. But you emphasize authentic to them. So I want to look at the words to them. Like, it wasn't that they were really creative and came up with a really good mission that, sounded good. You said, what is really driving them? What is really their mission? And then how do they bring that mission out in words that can define kind of the mission of the entity that they're part of? So I think that was really important what you said. I think the other thing you said is, everyone wants to have a mission like Elon Musk now, that we're going to go, colonize the galaxies. But what you said, and I think what's really important is, you shouldn't be trying to measure your vision on, is it as grand as Elon's vision, but is it, appropriate for what you're really trying to do? Does it capture the essence of what you're really setting out to do? And sometimes that could be grand, but it's grand and appropriate versus grand and like, yeah, whatever, inappropriate. So I think those expressions, I think, are a big deal. What's really driving kind of the leader or core leaders? How do they translate that into something that can rally a broader group of people? And is it well matched to the endeavor that they're setting out to do? I think those are important things you brought out.
And when you see it and meet someone who has really figured that out for themselves, it's so inspiring. Mm-hmm. And to me, it doesn't matter the scale of it, but just when people do kind of some of that deep work and figure out what really is motivating them and their mission and purpose. And I do think that can change over a lifetime for sure. But when you meet people, it's just so inspiring. And that's why I love doing what I get to do today, investing in companies. Is all day, every day, I'm working with people who are working in their purpose, working on their mission. For us, it's obviously in the business context, but there's nothing like being around someone who is operating in their purpose, chasing a mission that they feel deeply connected to. That's the fun stuff.
Yep. And maybe later in the conversation, when you start talking about some of the companies you're involved with, you can give us some examples. But let's go back to, what was the exit with your first company?
So I sold the company it closed on Halloween 2012. And we sold the company to AOL. And AOL bought us and merged us into Mapquest in 2012. AOL owned Mapquest and decided that they wanted to evolve Mapquest from a routing utility to a travel planning product. And they acquired us because we had all this travel content now, and we had all these travel connections, and we were a fast-moving startup. And they thought, hey, this will be the backbone of the evolution of Mapquest. So AOL bought us, merged us into Mapquest, and it was a good exit. Not at the Dan scale, but still a good exit. And we were proud of the work we did. And we basically took over product for Mapquest and tried to evolve it from a routing utility to a travel planning product. Our team merged over, and that was a great 2.5 years. So to recap that super quickly, I spent 2.5 years there, ultimately as head of consumer products at Mapquest.
Did you move, or were you doing that out of Boulder?
Actually, luckily, they're headquartered in Denver. So I stayed in Boulder and took the bus down to Denver every day. And we had 50 million monthly users at Mapquest, and we tried to build a more modern travel planning experience for them. It was a great time there. We ended up turning over 70% of the staff to rebuild the culture. We grew traffic for the first time in 13 years. We grew revenue for the first time in 14 years. And I think we evolved Mapquest, but it proved to be a stubborn problem. And the Mapquest user did not want travel planning tools laid into the map. The Mapquest user, as we all probably would assume, is a relatively older user. And all they really wanted to do was print maps. And in spite of our best efforts, we were not successful at evolving Mapquest to be a travel planning product, but we did build a great team. I was really proud of the accomplishments there. And then in 2015, I got a call from Techstars. The managing director of the Techstars Boulder program, which I had gone through, was Nicole Glaros at that time. And she was moving into the chief investment officer role at Techstars. And they needed to backfill the managing director in Techstars Boulder. And they called me and said, "Hey, Natty, we think you should apply for this role." And it was kind of an aha moment for me where I was like, oh, I've always wanted to be an investor. I was doing some, a little bit of investing on the side. I had great investors in my company who really helped me on my trajectory. I had the finance background and I loved the Colorado ecosystem. So I thought, hey, this actually is my dream job. I should go do this. I ended up getting the job. At the time, I think I was the youngest managing director by almost 10 years. And here I was sort of given the keys to the golden goose of Techstars, the flagship Techstars Boulder accelerator that I had loved and gone through and felt very highly of. And I took it over and I was super nervous to not screw it up because we had this great thing going. I ended up running the program for 6 years. And that was a great experience. So I use it as a catalyst to learn how to invest. And those 6 years
were roughly 2015
to 2020.
2020.
So I used those 6 years to learn how to invest, to build my track record, to prove to myself and to other people that I was helpful in working with entrepreneurs and that I could help change the trajectory for them. And maybe I'll jump even a little bit further forward here. While I was doing Techstars, I realized I had great deal flow. Not only from Techstars, but also I was meeting all these other great entrepreneurs.
Let's come back to that.
Okay.
And tell me about some of the Techstars companies that were in your program, some of the most memorable entrepreneurs, some of the most memorable companies, and kind of what they did.
Yeah, so
after being launched.
I was the way Techstars worked was I was recruiting and selecting and investing in 10 companies a year. Then I would have them go through my 13-week accelerator program, surround them with about 100 mentors, and really try to accelerate those companies. And so I ended up investing in 63 companies over those 6 years, 6 programs. I mean, there's countless stories, but we actually last week, one of my first companies just sold for $160 million. Fun story about them is they started as a company called Ad Hoc, and they were helping brands organize all of their social media ad spend into one app that would make AI-powered recommendations around how to move your spend from Snapchat ads to Instagram ads to Facebook ads. And in 2015,
I thought AI was just invented last year. Was around there?
Yeah. Well, I would challenge if they were actually really doing AI, too. Even back then, it was a buzzword. But this is early social media marketing days. That was an okay business, but this is one of the crazier pivots I have seen getting to pivots. This actually might almost be a leap. It's not, but they ended up becoming a vertical SaaS solution to the flooring industry, like carpets, vinyl flooring. What they found was they had all these flooring companies using their product, and they learned so much about the flooring industry. They realized we now know more about this industry than almost most of the retailers here because we have all their ad data and ad spend and learning about them. Let's build software for this industry. And so they ended up pivoting from ad tech to vertical SaaS for the flooring industry. But 2 founders, great founders. One story I love to tell about the CEO, Todd. The reason why I loved
Todd's
him.
Last name?
Saunders. So Todd, the 2 guys worked on the Google AdWords sales team, and the reason they came up with the idea was they were handling all the customer service calls for Google AdWords, or many of them. They were in this big call center for Google. And they just realized that all of these businesses had trouble understanding their social spend and across. And so that's how they identified the opportunity. When they applied to Techstars, they drove from San Francisco to Boulder to interview with us, showed up in a car. Very few founders did that, made the trek to meet us in person. So we loved their commitment. And then in getting to know them, Todd at one point ran a lawn mowing business to support his whole family when his dad lost his job. And I just loved this guy's hustle and grit and determination. And you just knew he was going to be a great entrepreneur. And so that was one of the first companies I invested in. They just exited, which is a great win for them and for the program. And then along that's just one of 63 stories of these founders who I'm lucky to have worked with. Not every company's worked out. We've had some companies fail.
Oh, sure.
We've got some $1 billion companies in there as well. And so like any portfolio, it's
well, give us one or two more examples that were memorable to you and help shape who you are today.
Yeah. Let's see. Another one I love to highlight is a company called Soona. So Soona's a company that's based in Denver, and they help brands get the product imagery they need to power their website and their marketing campaigns. And so a fun story about Liz is everyone kept referring me to Liz and saying, hey, you got to meet Liz for Techstars. She's great. And before I met her, I got the pitch for the business. And I remember seeing the pitch and not getting it. And I'm smart, but I don't know. I just didn't get it. And I was like, I don't think there's a business there and yada, yada. And everyone's like, hey, you got to go meet Liz. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go meet Liz. So I drive down to Denver. We meet at an Empanada's place on Santa Fe. And I sit down and in walks Liz, and she's fashionable. She's got the strut to her, which if you know Liz, you'll
I know Liz. She's very
got
confident. And when she gets on a stage, she's very, very strong presence.
She's got a very strong presence. She
and one of her idols is Barbara Walters. Seat before too long. We got to get Liz on our list.
Yeah, her idol is Barbara Walters, so she'd be a great guest on this. But Liz sits down across the table from me and just like wows me, just blows me away on her understanding of the market, her vision, her ambition to go big. And I remember sitting there saying, I'll have what she's having, like let's get her in the program. Like we should do anything to work with someone like this. And she's gone off to build a really nice business. And so just a fun story of, I learned a lesson as an investor, which is just go spend time with people who are really good. Even if you don't get their vision, go spend time to really understand it. And now I get it. Well, obviously now I do, but once I got it, I was like, wow, this is going to be really, really exciting. So they've done super well. Good Colorado success story here, off to the races. Another company is called Veho. So this is a company that helps non-Amazon brands do delivery with rideshare drivers. So Amazon has this thing called Amazon Flex, which enables anyone to go and deliver Amazon packages. Every other brand who doesn't work on Amazon should have the same functionality. So they launched that. I think this might be one of the fastest growing companies in history. 300, 400, 500 million in revenue, 3 years in, have done really well. Fun story or lesson learned on that one is Ita, the CEO, is Israeli. So one, always meet with Israeli founders because they are really good. Two is Ita was very difficult. And earlier in my investing career, I had trouble working with difficult people. Because I thought
so did my investors, but I was the difficult person.
I was going to ask here. Yeah. Well, I didn't really, I think what I didn't see was I felt like it was just hard to please him. And I didn't realize that actually, and he was never satisfied. And initially that bothered me.
But put that in the context of why were you needing to be the one to please him?
So this has been a growth area for me. So in running the Techstars program, I would ask for companies to give me a lot of faith in, hey, I promise you this is going to deliver value. Go through the motions, come to everything. And at the end, I know you're going to leave feeling like, hey, this was super worth it. And I needed that faith initially because I needed people to trust me, and I knew I would deliver. And most founders did kind of out of the gates. Ito was one of the few that said, okay, maybe. I really need you to prove it. And when I was running the program, I didn't appreciate that because I felt like I wasn't able to. I think it challenged me in a way that I wasn't used to and maybe sort of like prove myself more. And in the moment, it was hard because I was like, hey, trust me, man, I'm going to make sure this is worth it. And he's like, no, I want you need to deliver value. Like we talked about this. Like I only have so much faith and
only so much time too. Time's the most precious, resource that a entrepreneur has, particularly earlier stage ones. Well, really anyone. I guess it gets even harder as you're scaling up, and you're going through the life experience of, getting married, having kids, whatever your situation is. I mean, time is your,
totally.
You don't want to waste any minute.
And he was right. And I knew I would deliver value. I was like, hey, trust me, we're going to deliver value. But I was annoyed during the program because he kept pushing me. And it annoyed me because I was like, no, just like, let it work. And I didn't at the time appreciate him for it. And I now really appreciate it because he forced me to level up. And he took the program I was way better. The program really improved because of his pushing on that. And that dissatisfaction, while not always a strength, is actually a huge strength in entrepreneurs, because you need to never be satisfied with the status quo, with what's happening, with the performance of your team. You need to keep pushing. And so I'm always grateful to Ita, because he was the first entrepreneur I worked with that I really understood the value of that character trait. And I think he, even though was one of the harder people I ever worked with, helped me grow the most.
Yeah, but let's use this. Let's go a little deeper on this one, because a lot of people think a great CEO. You say, what makes for a great CEO? And the first thing most people think of are traits like, well, they got really good communication skills, and they're really good, interpersonal skills. They got a high EQ. They have this vision. They share the vision. They connect with the people. And then you're like, okay, maybe, but let's talk about who are the great CEOs. Are those the traits those great CEOs have? Okay, who's the great CEOs of our last 10, 20 years? And you start rattling them off, Jeff Bezos,
Steve Jobs.
You go down the list and you're like, maybe a little bit of that good characteristic, maybe a little bit of that, but mostly it's like, not really. That's not who they are. Mark Zuckerberg, pick whoever you want to pick. You'll find some that do have strong skills in those areas, but that's not the common trait. The common trait is more what you said, that they're
never satisfied.
They're never satisfied. They're, sometimes they have a lot of flaws in kind of who they are and how they approach things, but they're, almost always people are enormously driven, very rarely satisfied, are trying to do something that is really hard to do. And I think what you touched on earlier, they're coming from a place inside of themselves, sometimes a little bit of a dark space, but a space that is driving them to want to do something of significance that they really believe in. And everything else, if it's collateral damage, so what? We're going to go, get to, that big, vision that I have, and you're either with me or you're not. I don't really care. We're going to march down some path to get there.
Yeah, and I think that lack of satisfaction is one of the core traits of the best entrepreneurs. I like to think of like Steve Jobs 2.0 as kind of, he was never satisfied, but he grew personally. And I think you can be never satisfied and also not be an asshole and build a great company. But, sometimes not being satisfied comes across as being an asshole, and I think that's difficult.
I would maybe push on you on a little bit of that. I certainly think you don't have to be an asshole. There's plenty of examples of people who have all the right traits, are very successful, and you wouldn't look at it and say that person's an asshole. But a lot of people, they're just wired in a way that they're going to do what they're going to do. And a lot of us would look at that person and say, yeah, but you're an asshole. But that person doesn't have, I have a couple that come to mind for me. It's not like they can be successful as based on what their DNA is, and turn off that asshole meter. That just is who they are, and that's part of what is. I don't know. It's maybe not necessary, but it's not something they can necessarily control either. So
totally agree.
You gotta, if you want to work with people who are highly likely to be successful, some of them are just going to have that. It's just the way it is.
Well, I like...
An asshole doesn't mean that they're doing things that are ethically inappropriate, that they're...
Right.
That they're,
right, that's
there's a certain line.
Yeah, of course.
You can cross with that, but some of it is just, some of their behavior, EQ type behavior is, leaves a lot to be desired.
Well, I love people who have high expectations. In fact, it's one of the reasons I've loved working with you, Dan, is I think you're someone who holds people to high expectations, and those are the kind of people I want to work with, and those are kind of the founders I want to back. Those are kind of LPs that we want to have. Because we want to have super high expectations, and that's another trait that I see in the best founders we work with is just very high expectations for the people around them, for their performance, for what their investors do for them, and I like being challenged by that. I like having that high bar.
And it's a two-way street, because I love working with people who are ambitious. They could be any age. They could be any skill set. They could look any different way. But people who want to make a difference, who are ambitious, who want to learn, who want to make contributions, who view their professional life as an integral part of who they are, not the only part, but an integral part. And my fault is I do not like to work with people who are the opposite of that. I do not like it to a point where I'm not good at hiding that. It's like, okay, so as soon as I give up on you, as soon as I start treating you really nice and don't care about what you do and what you don't do anymore, it means I've put you in that category of I've given up on that person, and that's okay. People are different. That's not a standard. That's not a good versus bad. It's just I don't want to waste my time exerting energy with and this is in life in general, with someone who just doesn't really care much about what they're doing. They just they just meander their way through life. It's like, great, you go meander your way through life, but don't eat up my time. Right or wrong, that's just what it is.
That's why I love our line of work here. We get to spend our precious time and life energy on earth working with people who are ambitious, doing cool things, wanting to build. It's a real privilege.
And it's not, and I think you would agree with this, the standard isn't, are you successful or not successful? It's
it's
how
the
much
inputs.
do you care? Where's your ambition? There's lots of different formulas for who a person is and how a person behaves, that can be that. Some people can be that and not, the leader and not the next tier down. They're part of a team. And no leader I know of is successful without really strong people around them at many different levels and many different disciplines. So you can be that and not be competing against, the entrepreneurs who maybe are that at a different level and exhibit behavior that maybe, isn't the right behavior. You can be that and be part of a team, but people are more passive as ones where I don't disrespect them. I respect who they are and what they do. I just prefer not to spend much time with them.
Yep. Where do you want to go next?
Well, we haven't even gotten to, so part of this podcast, Colorado Innovators, we think of tech entrepreneurs. We think of, but we think more broadly. We think of creative people. We think of people who are, in the nonprofit world. We think of people who are in the political world. But what I really like, in addition to entrepreneurs, is those who are investors. So this is only the second one that we've recorded where the core function of the person is being an investor. And we haven't even gotten there yet. Actually, that's wrong. 3, because Steve was one of them. I'll say active investor. The other one was the Convoy brothers, which was awesome. So let's hit that part of your journey, because right now you're at Techstars, so you're kind of an investor, but you're really running an accelerator, and a component of that is you're ending up as an early investor, small in dollars, but meaningful in early ownership. But you're really not a venture capitalist at that point. Okay, so now it's 2020, and what happened?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go back a couple years to 2017. So in 2015, I met a colleague at Techstars. Actually, I didn't meet him through Techstars. A colleague, actually wasn't even a colleague at the time. It's funny to think about this.
Was he a person?
He was a person. Okay. He was a person. In 2015, Ryan Brosher, who's now a colleague, started Matchstick Ventures. And he came to my first Techstars program as a mentor and investor to potentially invest in some of the companies. And I got to know Ryan through his involvement as a mentor and investor in Techstars Boulder 2015. He ended up investing in the company I talked about earlier, Ad Hoc, which is now called Broadloom. And we became friends. In 2016, we hired him at Techstars. And he started running Techstars in Minneapolis. And I was his mentor into being a managing director at Techstars. And Ryan, on the side, had this fund called Matchstick Ventures, which was investing in startups mostly between the coasts, with a heavy emphasis on Colorado and Minnesota, where he was in Minnesota and building that entrepreneurial ecosystem. He got his MBA at CU Boulder, so he was here.
So he had a connection here.
He had a connection here. He knew all the Foundry folks. He actually had started a company here as well. So he was kind of going back and forth between these markets, started and running the small venture firm while also doing Techstars. And so we became fast friends. And at one point, Ryan approached me and said, "Hey, Natty, I want to scale Matchstick. I think I'm really onto something with this strategy. You and I have been doing a bunch of work together. We're on each other's investment committees for Techstars. You are my mentor into Techstars. We've co-invested together. What do you think about teaming up and starting to scale this firm under a certain investment strategy?" This is late 2017. So I'm running Techstars, and I said, heck yeah. We knew each other.
You can swear on this podcast, by the way.
Cool. I know I've avoided swearing twice. What if my parents are listening? No, my parents wouldn't care. So anyways, we came together, and I actually joined him at Matchstick in 2018. And a bunch of the reasons why I wanted to join him were, as I was running Techstars, I was helping all these founders, and they kept saying to me, "Natty, we love working with you. We wish you could write a bigger check. At Techstars, you can only write such the Techstars size check. You're so helpful. We'd love to keep working with you. Could you write a bigger check?" I was meeting all these founders, both that were going through Techstars and some that weren't. And I realized, wow, I have this great deal flow. I love working with entrepreneurs. The feedback I'm getting from entrepreneurs is that I'm very helpful. I might be good at this, and I might love this. This might be, the thing for me. And then here's Ryan on the side with Matchstick sort of approaching me and saying, "Hey, here's someone I really like working with and trust and love. I should do this." And so I teamed up with Ryan in 2018, and we raised Matchstick Ventures Fund 2. So I raised that on the side while I was also doing Techstars. So during that period, Techstars is probably more than a full-time job. Matchstick is more than a full-time job. I also happen to have 2 kids under the age of 3 at that point as well. But
how many do you have now?
I have 2 kids still. Yeah, 2 kids. Yeah. Love my wife. She really carried a lot of the load during that time period. But so yeah, I joined Matchstick. I know there's sort of 2 threads going at the same time here. I'm running Techstars. I'm also doing Matchstick. Techstars was very gracious in enabling us to team up on the side. And then in 2020, I ultimately left Techstars to exclusively focus on Matchstick. And so in 2018, going back, we raised our first fund together. That was our fund 2, a $30 million fund. And then in 2021, we raised our third fund, which is a $53 million fund that we're currently still investing in.
Am I in fund 3 or fund 2?
You're in fund 3.
Okay.
Yep. Dan, super grateful for you being an LP in that fund. And we've been operating the same strategy since the beginning, which is the premise: great entrepreneurs are everywhere. We have a bias towards backing entrepreneurs between the coasts. And so we're really focused on investing in the best entrepreneurs in Boulder, Denver, and the Colorado region, Salt Lake City, Austin, Chicago, Minneapolis, and Toronto. And we love these ecosystems. We're products of these ecosystems. As I told my story earlier, I came up in this market. I know a lot of people. I have a good track record, a good reputation. So we're advantaged to see and win deals here. Ryan, same story in the North region. So across Minnesota, Illinois, Toronto, where we're seeing most of the best startups. And so we feel like we have a unique advantage in supporting and investing in founders and entrepreneurs between the coasts. And that's our mission, is helping those founders at the earliest stages. And so now we're investing out of this third fund. We're on the home stretch of raising our fourth fund, and we'll keep doing what we're doing here. And we can get into some of the specifics of the strategy, but we're running the venture firm, Matchstick Ventures, under that strategy.
Yeah, let's talk about geography, because you start out between East Coast, West Coast, and then you picked a number of markets. I used to believe that your expression, great entrepreneurs are everywhere. Yeah, I used to wholeheartedly believe that. I mean, certainly great entrepreneurs are everywhere, but the probability of success of an entrepreneur, I do think, is materially different depending on what geography they're in. If you're in a geography that isn't known, doesn't have a history, doesn't have a critical mass of entrepreneurial activity, you're kind of starting out with a hand tied behind your back, and you don't. The relationships you have, are often geographic based. The area that you're picking for your business plan, it's often great if that area that you're picking from a business strategy standpoint is tied to the geography you're in, because there's certain knowledge that exists more in geographies, in certain industries than exists in other ones. So if you're going to try to build a business plan and you believe in, pick quantum, for example, and you're in, pick a market that has very little connection with quantum, the chance of you being successful is going to be really low. So I think there is something about the geography that matters a lot. I think, and when the geography is both known for innovation entrepreneurship, has an ecosystem around it, and the business that the entrepreneur wants to build is tied to the unique skill sets of the geography, I think those are two checkboxes that matter a lot.
I agree. And that's why basically all of our startups are in one of those 6 geos that I told you about, because we tend to agree. I mean, we don't think you can't build a big company in other cities, but the level of entrepreneurial density is really important, and customer density and level of sophistication, ability to recruit talent. And so we have seen the best success focusing on those major cities between the coasts. And so would we invest in a company in a smaller town outside of those big cities? We'd be open to it, but the bar is higher for us. But we do believe that you can build venture scale companies in those six cities that I mentioned.
And how do you view remote work, manage business through Zoom and online? So does maybe geography matters less because of that, or not? What's your view?
Well, I have 2 competing views in my head, and I haven't solidified on one. I think it's better to be in person. Personally, certainly for the early stage. I think it's just important to sit next to your co-founders and hash stuff out and whiteboard and figure stuff out, and just spending that time together in the early stage, I think, is really important. So we tend to bias towards companies that are co-located. On the same side of, or I guess in the same point of view, or on the opposite side of my brain, I guess I would say, it's amazing when you can find incredible talent and get them cheaply because they want to live somewhere else. And I get where companies do that and why they want to do that, to be able to access high-level talent at lower cost. And when you're a company and you're cash strapped and you need to get stuff done, I think that makes sense. I really wrestle with when's the time to not be co-located. In what scenarios is it make sense to have a remote worker? And to be candid, I don't think I have the right recipe for that right now. I think it's a rare entrepreneur who can run a fully remote company and get to real scale. I totally think it can be done. It's probably easier now than ever before, but I come back to, I think companies that are in person are going to outperform. And ultimately, there was a great tweet, I think by Sam Altman, which said, he set a poll on Twitter or X where he said, which of these 3 companies would you be most afraid to compete with? And the 3 options were 1, fully remote, 2, hybrid, or 3, fully co-located. And it was like 96% of people were most afraid to compete with a fully co-located team. Like, to me, that tells everything.
Wow.
So I don't know. I lean towards, I like companies that are together in person. I think it makes sense in certain circumstances to scale with remote talent. But especially coming out of COVID, we're more interested in companies that are co-located and building. And no, that doesn't mean you could have an office in Denver and an office in, we have a lot of companies that have an office in Denver and then they launch a sales office in San Francisco or whatever, or maybe you run engineering from one place. I think you can make it work, but ultimately, I think best case scenario, you're all in the same place, same roof. I don't. What do you think?
No, I think the way you articulate it is right. I mean, there is a wrestling there. I mean, there's not a one size fits all solution, but I think at a core of a company, if people are spending time together in person a lot, is really important. So that doesn't mean all people need to spend time in person all days and all live in the same city. It doesn't have to be to that extreme, but I think foundationally, that as an attribute of a company is really important. But there's room to have exceptions to that rules. We're 4 of us are here, and our kick-ass, engineer, software architect, is somewhere else far away from here, but we worked with them for like 4 years in our prior venture. So we kind of, already
Agreed.
built that relationship. We already talk in shorthand. You already you're not getting to know each other while you're trying to get the job done.
Yep.
So past
Well, and I think
relationships
there's
matter.
maybe this is like a fun little image, but a super motivating thing for me, and this is sort of heady, but also inspiring to me. So, in full vulnerability here, every time I drive between Boulder and Denver, I see all the buildings of downtown Denver and along the way, and I want to see logos of companies that I had a small part in getting off the ground on all of those buildings. Like that, like I want to be part of the next wave of great companies and employers and meaningful businesses that are happening here, that are happening in Salt Lake City and Austin, Chicago, et cetera. And I want to see people in those offices working hard and building their companies.
And in those communities. Yeah. We've kind of evolved as, we do a lot of direct tech investing, as you know, and we've evolved from being primarily Colorado, but it's okay to have exceptions to rule to, hey, let's just focus on Colorado. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't exceptions. Our most recent investment was was an exception to rule, although there were strong Colorado roots. But part of it is, I think there's plenty of opportunity to invest in here. I think we can play an outsized role in being part of the ecosystem, get access to the best entrepreneurs and best companies, earn our stripes there. But also, it's what you're saying, the fruits of our labor is, hey, I want to see those people in this community, being successful and doing really cool, interesting things that matter not just in Colorado, but matter nationally on a global stage. And I want to say, I had a small role in helping that entrepreneur, that team, that company achieve the outcome, and it's a Colorado company.
It's so motivating. Same for me. Yeah. Yep. Well, I think what's cool is we are going to see, and we're involved in many of these companies. Like there are so many smart people building interesting companies here in Colorado and across, our between the coast region. It's happening. Yeah. I mean, this is a great place to live. It's a great place to build. We have, Boulder, like to toot Boulder's horn, right? It's the highest concentration of PhDs anywhere. We have, scientists, and we have entrepreneurs, and we have the world's best football coach, and we have, like this is a great place to be. You want to be like you can live here, have a great lifestyle, do big and sophisticated and meaningful things. And I think that that's great, not only for Colorado, but we're seeing that in Chicago, we're seeing it in Austin and Salt Lake City. Like this is important for American competitiveness. I don't think it's good that innovation was only happening in San Francisco or New York for a long period of time. Like it needs to happen everywhere. There's great ideas everywhere. And, I think what's inspiring to us at Matchstick is, this is a deliberate investment strategy to produce returns. And that's our exclusive focus, is delivering great returns. And there's specific dynamics of investing in these markets that increase the odds for better returns and effectively elevate the floor and the ceiling for a venture portfolio. But we also get this win-win-win scenario where not only are we investing in great companies and generating returns, we get to have an impact in our communities and help spread entrepreneurship across the country, which I think is a really important thing for these communities.
Yeah, a principle of having impact that that applies to both entrepreneurs and applies to investors. If you want to have impact, be very, very, very successful in what you're doing, because you aren't going to have an impact no matter what your mission is and not be successful. You're going to be kind of a footnote in, boy, those guys had great intentions, but they are no longer in existence because they couldn't find a way to get it to work, whether that's in the context of a company that has been funded or a company or venture firm. So yeah, you can't confuse that. I mean, you can't ever, have a purpose, have kind of a broader intent that clouds that, hey, first and foremost, and we could end the statement at first and foremost, we're here to do well financially, because that's our ticket to do more and more. So tell us what else is unique about your firm and your investment strategy besides kind of the geographic focus.
Yeah, so the main focus for us is, one lens is geography. So we are not investing in San Francisco, New York, Boston, LA, Seattle companies. We are only investing in entrepreneurs between the coasts. Our number one market is Colorado, but we are open to investments in Austin, Salt Lake City, Chicago, et cetera, like I mentioned. Second is we're only investing in software companies, although we're starting to rethink that a little bit because you've talked a lot about this across the podcast episodes. Each of these geographies has some unique advantages, specifically here in Colorado in aerospace and quantum. And so we're starting to explore doing more outside of our core software focus, but everything is built around technology and technical innovation and ideally innovative products. And then we're only investing at the early stage, so pre-seed or seed rounds, which is the part of the company building that we know best, having now invested in over 100 companies and really learned a ton around what it takes to get something from 0 to 1. So those are three areas or three lenses that we look at the world. Some of the unique things about the strategy itself is, this may be a little bit of inside baseball, but we're big believers that the best way to generate returns for a seed fund, and we've become portfolio construction nerds over the years and really studied this to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success, is you need to have both high ownership and a lot of shots on goal. And the reason for this is early stage investing is relatively risky because you're investing in usually a great team with an interesting market and idea, but not a lot is proven there. And many of these companies don't end up working out because the market doesn't materialize or the thesis doesn't prove to be true or a host of other reasons. And so if you're investing on the sort of riskier end of the spectrum, our view is you want a bunch of bets. You want a bunch of companies. You want a bunch of opportunities to be right. But then on the flip side of that is you also need to own enough of those companies so that when you get something really right and an entrepreneur...
Own enough, meaning owning enough of a portion of those successful companies.
Exactly, yeah. To have enough ownership, equity in that company so that when it actually gets big, it generates returns. And one of the benefits of our investment strategy, investing between the coasts, is we're investing at about a 50% lower valuation than similar companies on the coast. And if we assume we're doing our job right, which is investing at the same caliber of entrepreneur, the same caliber of idea, the same market opportunity as our coastal peer seed funds, we have a bunch of leverage and effectively a pricing arbitrage investing between the coasts. And to be clear, this isn't taking advantage of the entrepreneurs. This is just the price. The cost of operating is lower here in these markets. The cost of living is lower. These entrepreneurs get more done with less capital.
And the perceived risk.
Yep.
And I'll stress the word perceived. The perceived risk is higher because they're not in Silicon Valley. So whether you believe that perceived risk is real or not, is a question: are you arbitraging that, or are you getting a less expensive entry price because it's harder to be, if everything else is lined up, the idea, but is it harder to be successful? And I'm with you that I think so long as you're in a developed ecosystem. If you're in an underdeveloped ecosystem, I think the risk profile is very different. But if you're in a developed ecosystem that the team is taking advantage of and what they're doing is matched up well to that ecosystem, I think that does close the gap between, are you taking on more risk? And I think, from a Silicon Valley standpoint, I think there's new types of risk that have been introduced there that didn't exist 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, the expectations of people who are out there are much higher. The cost of living is much higher now than maybe it was 10 years ago. They're, how committed are they to that company versus, hey, this is my bet, and if it doesn't look really good 3 months later, I'm going to jump to the next thing.
Well, and their talent is doing it. People, there's a term for this, and I can't remember it off the top of my head in Silicon Valley, like employees option farm. They basically go somewhere, they get their options, whatever, they stay long enough that they vest half their options, and they go to the next hot company and try to get options there. And so, as an entrepreneur, how can you build a great company if you're turning over 50% of your staff every year? So I agree with you. As long as the market is sufficiently developed, I think you're not taking on much, if any, excess risk by investing in entrepreneurs.
And maybe it's even in a lot of cases, maybe it's even the reverse. You're getting better entry point, but it's perhaps less risky if you pick the right circumstances. And I think some of the industry sectors here in Colorado definitely fit in that mode. If you're trying to do some of those businesses in Silicon Valley, good luck.
Right.
This is where you wanted to be doing some of those businesses, not there. And
that's actually a good point too. So like some of our businesses are very similar to businesses you might find in Silicon Valley. So for instance, we just backed a company, basically the head of engineering and head of product at Twitter's data business, which was headquartered here in Boulder, which Elon shut down when he took over Twitter. they started a new company, building tools for product teams to manage and monitor all of the AI stuff they're building. This team is A+, world class, could totally find this product or this business in Silicon Valley. On the flip side, we backed a company that's doing vertical software for the dairy industry called Milk Movement. This is a company that no one in Silicon Valley was interested in because no one in Silicon Valley knows much about the dairy industry. But my partner Ryan's in Minneapolis has a front-hand view to how big that industry is. It's still mostly pen and paper. And so we also get these, unique investment opportunities in markets that have not yet maybe gotten on the radar of these Silicon Valley firms.
That's a great example of where you're taking advantage of your geography, both from an entrepreneurial standpoint, investor standpoint. You're not competing with a recent example I had where was a company that came in and they had this great idea, and it was a great idea because it needs to be done. But it was also like the feedback I gave them, I wanted to be, in this case, I wanted to be transparent with them because I think it could be helpful. And I'm like, do you not think this idea is being worked 10 times in Silicon Valley? And when they are doing it in Silicon Valley, you're kind of serving kind of the investor world, while the investors who do it are going to adopt it themselves. Whether it's best product or not doesn't really matter. They're backing it, and that's going to be their choice. And they're not even going to think about what you're doing out here. So it's not just can you outcompete the people? It's like you're picking an area that's going to be. It's such an obvious thing that's going to happen. So it's not a bad idea in that sense, but it's not a unique idea, and it's one that Silicon Valley is much better, situated to do, and they're going to take multiple shots on goal to do it. The probability of you being successful to me seems low.
Yeah. And I think, another thing to highlight here is since we are investing at these lower valuation, which enables more companies per fund and more ownership per company, which is a really powerful recipe for us as a fund. I actually think the lower valuations are better for the founders too, because effectively the valuation you raise at is a proxy for the expectations of the progress you're going to make as a company. And when you set lofty and unrealistic expectations around that, really you have to thread a needle just so perfectly. There's very little room for error. And as we know, these early stages are just like error after error after error for these founders. Why give yourself unrealistic expectations? So we prefer entrepreneurs who are more under promise, over deliver. And so many of these Silicon Valley startups come out of the gates at a pre-seed with 20, 30, 40, $50 million valuations. The expectation of progress there is just super unrealistic, where our companies are much more reasonable valuations, which gives them a ton of room to go up from there, and actually makes them more appealing to the next round of investor because you can get a nice uptick on valuation without having to go super high. So I actually think that these fairer valuations are not only good for us as a firm, they're actually better for founders. And we're excited. This generation of founders are doing more with less. They're using AI to get a bunch done. They're way scrappier. They know that capital isn't just around the corner like it was in 2020 or 2021. They're much more thoughtful about the implications of their valuation. And so we're very excited about the quality of founders and the ethos and the mindset of this vintage compared to the last vintage. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's maybe some insight based on the fund strategy.
Yeah. So let's pick a few that you're most excited about. Pick a few across your different funds and highlight that. And then I want to leave time also to then look well forward in time and get your kind of let yourself go loose a little bit and say, okay, if I look at things over the next 10 to 15 year period, what are you seeing out there? So let's start by highlighting a few of your portfolio companies.
Cool. Since we're here in Colorado and passionate about Colorado, I'll pick a few Colorado ones.
Great. So thank you.
A fun company we have out of Fort Collins is a company called Tilt, Tilt, founded by Jen Henderson, who's a fantastic entrepreneur. The company's mission is to help employees and employers manage leaves of absence. So maternity leave, a paternity leave, a bereavement leave, a disability leave. There's a lot of legislation now around how employers need to manage these leaves of absence and be compliant. There's also a bunch of federal rebates for offering leave effective leave policies for employees. And so this company started as this HR tech company solving this problem for HR teams, which is actually a very complex problem because you have all these different leaves happening. You have to be in compliance. There's different reimbursements and regulations. It's quite a bit of paperwork, and it's very difficult for HR teams to manage this. They developed a great software product that alleviates this pain for HR teams. They're doing super well, scaling fast out of Fort Collins. Sort of a niche HR problem, but it actually is applicable to every company. And there's a bunch of legislative tailwinds that the company is riding. So very excited about that company up in Fort Collins. Let's see, who else should I highlight? We just backed a company in Boulder called Althea, which is led by a dear friend of mine, Nico. It's his second company. His first company is a super successful company called Redox, which is, I think, on the path to go public at some point in the next 5 years. So has built a very successful company actually out of Madison, Wisconsin. Moved to Boulder while running that company. Ultimately left and decided to start a new company. And what he's starting is vertical software for the regulated introduction of psychedelics. So Colorado and Oregon are the first two states to legalize the ability for psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists to administer psychedelic experiences to treat PTSD, to treat substance abuse, substance addiction, all sorts of ailments that people have, which have proven to be very effective. And so Colorado and Oregon are on the forefront of legalizing this. However, to be able to legalize it, you need a significant amount of onboarding, a significant amount of monitoring, and they're basically building the canonical software tool to be able to manage the intake of patients, manage and monitor the experience itself and the results from it, and build a huge data set around the effectiveness of it. This is a bipartisan issue. 2 states it's legal in. There's, I think, 12 that are supposed to legalize in the next year and another 12 behind that.
And, Joe Rogan is a huge advocate of that. And obviously he now has significant influence in Washington, and particularly as it comes to people with PSD. But in his case, I think it's, he sees benefits in general. I do kind of breathing exercises, pretty significant breathing exercises. And, sometimes it will, you'll kind of trigger that, but you got to work really hard and it's very problematic. So I've toyed with doing kind of a mushroom experience.
Yeah, like a facilitated experience. They call it. Yeah.
So I've talked to some close friends of mine who've done those, and there's most say do it, but whether you're going to do it again or not depends on who you are. And I met with someone who's a facilitator. She coached through what would happen. And I just haven't been able to pull the trigger yet.
Yeah. Well, it's powerful. I think it would be really good for society for it to, be legalized. But obviously, it's not a GLP-1 or whatever. This is like a real experience that needs to be done the right way. Mm-hmm. And our view is that it's going to be legal everywhere. Our view is that it's going to be very important for medicine going forward and have a huge impact. But it needs to be done the right way, and their software is helping make sure it's done the right way. And so we love this team. We believe in this team a lot. We think this is a market. I mean, this is a classic venture bet, right? It's you want to take an A+ team with a emerging market where if they win, they could be the category leader. And if they win, it could be really big. And so if they become the canonical data provider and data set, this is lucrative, very lucrative, because you end up having regulators pay, you have municipalities pay for it, you have the therapists and psychologists pay for it, you have pharma who's paying for it because they want to make sure that they're getting the data they need on the efficacy of their compounds. It's just a very interesting business, and that's the kind of bets that we should be taking as venture investors.
And let's talk about one more that we're both in together, although I'm in a lot of what you're describing through your fund, but the one that we're also a direct investor, and that being All City, which Brandon was on here. We dropped his podcast. Tell us what Brandon's doing and
so I'm excited
about there.
Yeah, we're both involved in this. So Brandon's the CEO of All City. And All City's mission is to make it more fun to be a sports fan.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they launch team and region specific podcasts, YouTube shows, blogs, events, watch parties, bars, to really appeal to the diehard fans of any sports team. And I've been an investor in the company for a long time. I actually started as a friend of Brandon, where he asked for a bunch of advice, and actually applied to Techstars when I was running it, and I turned him down. But he kept pinging me and asking for book recommendations, and I'd recommend all these business books to him, and he'd read every one and write back to me and say, "Here's what I took away from it." And I was like, "Man, this guy he's a monster, like in a good way." He's just voracious. He's a great learner. He's very self-aware. And then I started using the product. I'm a big Broncos fan. I'm a big Colorado sports fan. Broncos, Buffs, Avs, Rockies, Nuggets are my teams. And I started using their podcasts and listening, and I became a fan. And I realized, like, this is the future of sports media, and invested early on. You also joined as an investor, and this company's headquartered in Denver. It's doing quite well. They're in five cities now. You can listen to the podcast with Brandon to learn more, but this is the future of sports media. Customers love it. Their fans are fanatics. Advertisers love it. I mean, it's going to be a really, really good business. I'm super proud of Brandon. I mean, he is put on earth to solve this problem. And when you meet him, you see that. I mean, talk about a guy with a mission, and he's gone through a lot to get where he is. And this is going to be a great company for great success story for Colorado. And I'm proud of Brandon.
Good. Okay. So let's get you to look forward in time. And maybe I'll give you a couple categories. One is, what does Colorado look like as a geography for capital formation, a geography for innovation, entrepreneurship, and things that come along with that? What does that look like 10 years from now?
Well, so here's some quick stats on where we are today. So Colorado, the Boulder, Denver metro is fifth right now in funding in 2024 at this point in the year. Where first is San Francisco, Bay Area, 2 is New York, 3 is Boston, 4 is LA, and 5 is Boulder, Denver. We are doing great. That is great. We're well ahead of Austin, Chicago, Salt Lake City, Miami.
Well, I think to be fair though, we're ahead, but we're not well ahead. I think the difference between 5th and 10th is close. Is close. So I think I think that's important because we want to be 5th, and then a big step away from us is 6th, and we got work to do. It's good we've kind of tweaked ahead of those, but I think we have an opportunity to kind of double down and start to create some separation.
I agree. And thanks. That's good clarification. Yeah. We're in 5th, but I want us to own 5th. Yes. Maybe even get 4th. I think we could get 4th. And we're coming for you, LA.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is a great place to start a company. We just had one of the biggest IPOs of the year was Ibotta out of Denver. This is just a great place to live. It's a great place to build a company. We have great entrepreneurial density. So looking 10 years out, my hope is we just keep the momentum that we have right now. I don't think we need to do anything heroic. We just need to keep compounding, attracting great entrepreneurs here. We need to support the entrepreneurs that are already here. Techstars coming back is, I think, really helpful.
I do think there's one thing we need to do that I could could be put in the heroic category. And that is the big pockets of capital that exist within the state in high net worth families. Unlike Silicon Valley, most of that money does not get invested in tech. Maybe a small portion of their portfolio does, but typically that's investing in West Coast, venture firms, maybe East Coast. But we need kind of those types of deep pocketed families, high net worth to say, you know what, I can make the returns and I can allocate more of my portfolio to support Colorado, and I can do that through entities like Matchstick, or I could do that by participating in a more direct fashion. But man, if we unleash that money, it's going to be a game changer.
100% agree. And we one of the things sometimes we talk with LPs, we say, look, we have consistent top quartile returns and we're in your backyard. Why would you not allocate to that? And so I think there's an education, I think curve. I think there's a little bit of just networking, matchmaking, and I'm working on that a little bit too. And I know you and I have some ideas together. We just launched this thing called pitchcolorado.com, which is organizing, getting VCs to connect with startups. We're going to start to this year in 2025, add angel investors in that so we can connect angel investors to startups more easily. my view is I want to go up the stack even further, which is how do we connect LPs with VCs, maybe even connect LPs directly with founders. I think there's a lot to be done here. And I agree. I think that'd be a huge win. And let's make it happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel bullish on this ecosystem. What I like about it is, I don't know if you remember during COVID, Miami and Austin were kind of, everyone was hooting and hollering about them. And, there was a lot of sizzle, not much steak there. And maybe to use, a cowboy Denver metaphor, this old ranching town that's now a real tech powerhouse here in Colorado. Like Denver and Boulder was just, we were not talking, we were just building. And I think like this ecosystem, I appreciate it's give first. It's like, let's build, let's help each other, let's elevate it. And I agree. We should have more folks who are here investing here. You can get the same returns here without, having to put your money on the coast. Those returns can go back into this ecosystem.
And the unique challenge we have is not that those big pockets of money are necessarily investing elsewhere. I think that's a byproduct that those big pockets of money that exist here for the most part, didn't make their money through tech. They made their money through real estate or through oil.
Ranching.
So investing in tech is like a scary word for them, but as it gets to like that next generation, so second gen, also it's like, well, we need to take, 40% of our portfolio and focus on tech. We need to kind of intersect that with, and some portion of that 40% should be here in Colorado because you will get great returns and you get the added benefit of really helping to juice up our whole community.
Agreed. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. So AI, quantum, other stuff, what's the world going to look like? Not 50 years from now, but 10 years from now. How different is the world going to be?
Well, if I give you my answers, everyone's going to go, this is my precious crystal ball here.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Here's the trends that I'm seeing. The pace of innovation is only speeding up. The pace of information is only speeding up. And I'm not, that's probably a good thing for humanity. I think it's a lot to manage as an individual. Just the pace that things are going right now is just so fast, but I don't see it slowing down. So my view is it's pretty impossible to predict where we're going to be in 10 years, 50 years. Wow. The pace of innovation right now with quantum, aerospace, space tech, defense tech, AI, crypto, robotics. I mean, a lot of this stuff coming together is I think very exciting. I'm a believer that technology moves humanity forward. I believe that technology creates an abundance for humanity. And so, maybe not, my milk dairy vertical SaaS maybe isn't changing the world per se, but I do think technology moves us forward. I believe that entrepreneurs build a better future for all of us. And so I'm just super excited to see what entrepreneurs will create over the next 10 years. And I think it's kind of unpredictable in an exciting way.
Yeah. I mean, if your definition of better world is less people starving, less people dying early from preventable causes, there is no question on the world stage that we've been on this arc of progress driven by technology. I mean, there's a lot of social things we have to deal with, but if you take two steps back and say, okay, let's look at everyone on the globe and how they live today versus how they lived 50 years ago, how they lived 100 years ago, how they lived 1,000 years ago, it's dramatically better for everyone. I mean, maybe not every single person, but for every metric is dramatically better. And it applied across every human in the world. And I think more people who really kind of look at it through that lens, I think is good.
Well, one thing I'm seeing that is exciting is there's a funny thing where someone was like, we were promised flying cars, but we got 140 characters. And some people criticize the innovation economy from, call it, 2008 to 2018, where, it was like mobile apps and social apps. And maybe that was true, but there was a lot of innovation still during that phase. But what I'm very excited about this phase, I feel like entrepreneurs are getting even more ambitious.
Yes.
Like we mentioned, robotics, quantum, AI. We're innovating on big societal problems more now than we are on maybe smaller, mobile games and stuff like that. And I think that
Julian's
is exciting.
Not going to be happy that you said that.
What?
Julian Freer is not going to be happy
Julian.
that you just
Shout out
dissed the
Julian.
movies.
No, I mean, everything has its place, right? It's all moving us forward. So, but yeah, and obviously, tech doesn't solve every problem out there, and we got to deal with, inequities and stuff like that, of course. But just looking at the products and services that I think we'll all have available to us over the next 10 to 50 years, like I think people will be we'll be able to cure many of the diseases. I don't know if you've been in a Waymo yet in San Francisco. It is a really cool experience.
Has, they talk about
these, we're going to reduce traffic deaths. It's just so much is coming. That's exciting.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing for the broader Colorado community, leading by example as an investor, but also finding time to be supportive of the community. Extremely likable guy who if anyone says, do you know Natty? It's like, oh yeah, he's a great guy. He's just a really nice guy. And I think that's something that, is a big deal. So thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you for everything you do. And we're lucky to live here. Let's keep making it great.
Yes. All right, good.
Thanks.
All righty.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Roars. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like and subscribe on your listening platform. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Kendall Weinberg with support from Courtney Caruso, Emily Reed, and Gibson Siegert.